Imagine a narrow, long tunnel filled with murky water. To get through, you must close your eyes, take a deep breath, and feel your way along the walls as you dive toward the other side. It sounds like a scene from a horror quest, but it was a real-life event in Mexico's Gruta de Carrizal cave, where an ordinary adventure turned into one of the most tragic caving incidents in history. On the late morning of November 26, 1971, a group of adventurers from various Texas cities gathered at Bustamante Canyon, Mexico. Among them was John Everidge, an experienced spelunker and the leader of the Houston group. Confident and skilled, John had undertaken many cave dives, but this one would challenge him in ways he could never have imagined. With him was Chris Cleveland, an enthusiastic near novice, eager, yet lacking the experience needed for such risky conditions. Lastly, there was Bruce Stone, a complete rookie. This was Bruce's very first caving trip, and he was eager to prove himself, unaware of the dangers that lay ahead. The group's spirits were high as they approached their next challenge, the Gruta de Carrizal cave, a natural wonder. Famed for its winding passages, the cave's beauty masked the deadly dangers within, specifically a narrow, water-filled tunnel known as a siphon, which would soon play a central role in a tragic series of events. Gruta de Carrizal was no ordinary cave. Tucked away in the rugged landscape of Bustamante Canyon, it was a labyrinth of dark, twisting tunnels and treacherous paths. While much of the cave was dry and well ventilated, making it relatively easy to navigate, certain sections became dangerous, especially when water levels rose during the rainy season. One of these perilous areas was the Siphon, an underwater passage that connected two dry surfaces. To continue exploring the cave, one had to pass through it, an obstacle that could quickly turn deadly. Siphon diving isn't a straightforward tube that can be followed blindly. To reach the air-filled chamber on the other side, one must carefully stay to the right. In low water conditions, the siphon spans about 10 to 15 feet horizontally, but when water levels rise, its length increases significantly. At the time of this incident, the water had risen by roughly a foot, extending the siphon to around 25 feet. To navigate it, divers had to descend at least 10 feet and follow the ceiling closely. While the water to the right is about 15 feet deep, the left side plunges to over 40 feet, with unexplored passages and several small air pockets in the ceiling. Experienced divers had previously explored this siphon with the right equipment, taking time to map the tunnel's end. However, there are several dead-end passages and water-filled tunnels on the left that remain largely unexplored, adding an extra layer of risk to an already perilous dive. The group arrived near the cave on Thursday morning, set up camp, and spent the remainder of the day preparing for 2 days of caving. On Friday morning, they headed to the Carrizal cave, which was conveniently located near their campsite. Upon reaching the cave, the large group, about 20 people, split into smaller parties. One group entered the cave first, while the other followed about 10 minutes later to avoid congestion. The cave itself was fairly straightforward, with wide, walkable passages. At the end of the lower-level passage lay the siphon. The group was informed that the siphon had been crossed many times before, leading to further exploration of the cave, but it required swimming and underwater diving skills. While one group decided to explore the upper level of the cave, the second group, led by John Everidge, aimed to see the famous siphon and possibly attempt to pass through it. Upon reaching the siphon, they saw a narrow, water-filled hole in the ground. The area was dark and eerily silent, but the team kept chatting to maintain a positive atmosphere. John, aware of his responsibility as the leader, informed the group that he would dive first to assess the conditions before anyone else attempted it. John plunged beneath the rock, swam a few feet, and returned. On his second attempt, he dove deeper but resurfaced quickly, explaining that he hadn't taken in enough air. Finally, after 2 unsuccessful attempts, John pushed further and reached the air-filled chamber on the other side. The cave beyond the siphon wasn't extensive, so after about 15 minutes of exploration, John swam back to rejoin the group who had been anxiously awaiting his return. John answered all the group's questions about the other side of the siphon, explaining how far it was and emphasizing the importance of following the ceiling of the tunnel. Someone asked if an external air supply was necessary for the dive. John reassured them that it had taken him only 25 seconds to reach the other side, and since most people can hold their breath for over a minute, he felt that inhaled air would be more than sufficient for the crossing. While John was talking to the group, Chris Cleveland quietly decided to attempt the dive. He said nothing to anyone, and the group assumed he was confident enough to make it. After Chris had apparently crossed, Bruce Stone, eager to follow, decided to try as well. John again explained the process and attached a safety line to Bruce before he dove in. After about 2 minutes, there were a few jerks on the rope, and when it was pulled back, it came untied. The team, including John, assumed that Bruce had also made it and was now exploring the other side with Chris. No one else was eager to attempt the dive until both boys returned. After about 2 hours, most of the group grew bored and left, while only a few remained, waiting for Chris and Bruce to come back. John began to worry as the time dragged on, realizing it was taking the boys far too long to explore the cave on the other side. Concerned, he decided to dive back through the siphon to investigate. Once he reached the other side, John called out for Chris and Bruce but received no response. After a brief search, he returned to the group, unsettled. John quickly sent some members of the group out of the cave to seek help. Unfortunately, all attempts to reach the American consulate went unanswered, even on the emergency lines. Desperate, the group contacted someone in the US to try reaching out to the government for assistance. This also led nowhere, despite attempts to contact the Air Force, Army, Navy, and even the State Department in Washington. Throughout this time, John held on to the hope that the boys had found an unknown passage or an air pocket, allowing them to stay alive while they awaited rescue. Meanwhile, a team of divers from Laredo, Texas, was located, and after some delays, they arrived at the cave on Saturday night. They attempted to dive through the siphon, but after several tries, the water was too murky to continue, and the search was postponed until the next morning. Although they could navigate by touch along the ceiling, it was too risky to explore the surrounding passages without clear visibility. Early Sunday morning, the divers tried again. With much better visibility, they ventured into the passage on the left. After a few minutes, they discovered the bodies of Chris and Bruce, still within the siphon, about 40 to 50 feet from its entrance. Bruce's body was floating near the ceiling, while Chris's was found roughly 15 feet away, suspended neutrally in the water. The rescue team concluded that the boys hadn't followed John's instructions to stick to the ceiling. Instead, they had pushed blindly into the wrong passage, becoming disoriented, panicking, and tragically drowning. The divers recovered the bodies but refused to help remove them from the cave. That grim task fell to John, some scouts, and members of another caving group who had come to assist. Since this tragedy, it's strongly advised to explore the deadly siphon only with proper gear and sufficient diving experience. For more in-depth stories like this one, be sure to explore our channel.